Hello and welcome to the arcade. You know, the end of the year typically marks the perfect spot to pause and reflect on everything you've accomplished this year as a gamer. All the games you played and finished and ticked off your backlog, and all the memories that you made along the way. And most people like to choose their game of the year and see how that stacks up against the annual Game Awards. But unlike most gamers, some of us are more focused on completing our backlog or playing older titles that we missed out on rather than playing all the new releases throughout the year. And that means we typically don't have a game of the year, or not at least one that actually released this year. For example, if I had to pick a game of the year this year, it would have to be Starfield because that's the only game that came out this year that I actually played. And no, I didn't hate Starfield or anything like that, but it makes it really hard to pick one game of the year when you've only played one game that actually came out this year. With that being said, I would rather recap my personal year, including games that didn't come out this year because, let's face it, if I didn't do that, this video would be super short, and tell you some of the games that stuck out to me that I played this year, and so on and so forth. So here we go. Here's what I played in 2023. Number 1. Elden Ring. I've talked about Elden Ring before, so there may not be too much left to say. But this game made quite the impression on me. It wasn't the first From Software game that I ever played, but it was the first one that I really committed to. I had played Demon's Souls back in 2009, but gave up after about 10 hours or so. Then I tried Bloodborne a few years ago and only made it about 15 hours in before I gave up. And then I tried Dark Souls 3 last year, but could only stick with it for about 5 hours. So what made Elden Ring different? Well, it still feels like all of those games in a lot of ways, but I believe that the open world, my choice to go with a mage character, which I typically never do in these types of games, and my dedication to actually finishing the game from the beginning changed everything for me. Most of the time, for better or worse, I will just try to naturally gel with any game that I play. I don't set out to spend a certain amount of time playing it or try to beat it even. I just play it, see if I like it, and if I do, I tend to keep coming back until I've experienced everything I want from the game. But my decision from the very beginning to beat Elden Ring was probably the main driving factor in me actually beating it. And you know what? I'm so glad that I did that. Elden Ring was one of those games that got me back into gaming and revitalized my love for this medium of entertainment. Playing Elden Ring felt like being a kid again, experiencing some amazing adventure like you've never seen before and exploring the unknown. And even though it can be a really challenging game, it never felt like I was beating my head against the wall. I felt like I always had a direction I could go to help me keep moving forward. I even started a new game plus right after beating it and beat it again. Something I've never done before in any game. Elden Ring really encapsulates a lot of firsts for me as a gamer, and I will always love it for that. Number 2. A Short Hike. A Short Hike was a game that had me hooked from the first trailer I saw. I am so into this art style, and the game plays even smoother than it looks. Going from the horrific wonders of the open world of Elden Ring to the open world of A Short Hike is much more relaxed and inviting. There's still a sense of wonder and exploration, especially once you've gathered enough golden feathers to fly for a long time. But this game really felt like an escape, and it was always a super fun, relaxing, and enjoyable game to replay, which I did at least 4 times, I think. It's a great little game that has a surprising amount of things to discover. Number 3. Stardew Valley. Another one that got me back into the gaming medium, Stardew Valley really felt like a second life to my own, a whole other world I could live in whenever I needed to. There's absolutely no rules, no pressure to do anything you don't want to do. You can run your farm exactly how you want and choose to ignore all the people and problems of the world outside. I loved exploring the mines, and I think I got all the way to the bottom within just a couple of days because I was so addicted to it. Nothing has been quite as great as that experience so far at least, but the game itself overall is just so great. It begs you to experiment and try new things, and most of the time, you will be highly rewarded for the things that you do try. It's a game I can always go back to no matter how long I've been away from it and still feel like I know what to do and where to go. It still feels like a second little home to me. Number 4. Alba, a wildlife adventure. Alba was the first game I played right after Elden Ring, and it was almost like a breath of fresh air in some ways. Not that Elden Ring was suffocating, but yeah, it kinda was sometimes. I beat Alba in about 2 sittings or so and completed 100% of the game. It's not challenging at all, it's kind of a kid's game, it has no combat or anything intense. Really all you do is just go around the island taking photos of wildlife and talking to people. It controls really well, it has a great art style and really nice music. It was a ton of fun and surprisingly good for what I thought was just a kid's game going in. Number 5, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. My ultimate play this if I don't know what else to play game, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is like that friend that never leaves, but you don't really mind. I played through all of the new DLC this year as well, and boy, there are some amazing new tracks. I still can't get over the value of the Booster Pass, $25 for 48 tracks and a handful of new characters. Although I do have to say I'm a bit disappointed that the majority of the new DLC tracks seem to be from Mario Kart Tour, but overall it's such a great purchase and a necessary one for anyone who still plays Nintendo's everlasting kart racer. Number 6, Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. I made an entire video on this one already, so I'll try not to repeat myself too much here, but Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time is one of my favorite games ever. It had been a few years since I'd replayed through the game, but playing it again this year was a great reminder of how good Ubisoft used to be. The controls are so tight and excellent. The combat, while repetitive sometimes, is really fun once you've mastered all the different mechanics. And the story is really fun and engaging, it's fast-paced and feels like you're playing a movie. I can't recommend Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time enough. It is one of the greatest games of all time. And I feel like I started a new tradition of playing through it at least once every year from now on. Number 7, Skyrim. This is my favorite game of all time. Check out my video here about Skyrim for my full thoughts, but man, what a great game. The story, the choices, the exploration, the combat, everything feels great. Especially the exploration though. No matter what you're doing, it's almost like every time you veer off the main path of the story, it feels like you get rewarded for it, not punished, even if you don't wander that far off. Almost every cool thing that you see in the distance while roaming the open world can be explored, and most of the time you're gonna find something worthwhile, or at least get some experience while fighting off a bandit horde or something. There's an unbelievable amount of NPCs to talk to, side quests to go on, and just a fantastically handcrafted and beautifully designed open world to explore, and you could just spend hours and hours exploring this world and still find fun new things to do. I can't say enough good things about Skyrim. It's my favorite game of all time, and I'm so glad that I played through it again this year for its 12th anniversary. Number 8, Trackmania: Nations Forever. Trackmania is such a weird game for me to like. Does that make sense? Like, I play no other games like this, yet it's had its hooks in me since 2008, and I still feel the urge to play it, usually weekly or at least once a month. A super competitive and precise racing sim type game is not at all what I would typically play, but the expert design of the controls and the precision of the course design is something that will keep me coming back to this game for years to come. That on top of the fact that I have so many great memories of playing this game with my brother and my best friend back in the summers of our last years of high school. Those were some great times that I will never forget. Number 9, Clash Royale. Sorry, but this one is one I would consider a guilty pleasure. Clash Royale is something I never talk about here, but it is something that I have played almost every day since 2016, apart from a 3-month break I took earlier in 2023. I'm definitely hooked back into it now though, and even though I've never spent any money on this game, I've spent more time in this game than it ever deserved to get from me. I'm not super committed to it, I don't go ultra competitive or anything, but I do play it almost every day. I can quit anytime, I swear! Number 10, Lost in Shadow. My best friend gifted me this game for my birthday back in 2010 or 2011 or something, and it actually took me a while to get around to playing this game. but I played through it again this year for my video, which you can find here. It is such an underrated gem that I wish more people talked about. It's not super flashy or anything, but it is such a solid puzzle platformer with a cool premise, satisfying puzzles, and a little bit of combat mixed in there as well. And on top of that, it has some really nice graphics, especially for the Wii. The Wii had so many games, it was hard to catch all the good ones, but Lost in Shadow and these next two that I'll talk about are some you should definitely check out. Number 11, Deadly Creatures. Deadly Creatures is just such a cool game. You play as a tarantula and a scorpion, switching between the two, and follow a story of greed and betrayal while lurking in shadow and underfoot. It's just a really solid mix of third-person action, adventure, and even some horror elements as well. I could do without the QuickTime events, but hey, I'll concede one annoying trope of that era for a really solid game overall. Number 12, Blob. Blob is actually a game I never played until this year, which sucks because it's definitely something I would have really enjoyed even more as a kid back when I first got my Wii. It has some of the smoothest and most satisfying gameplay of anything on the Wii, and the art style and presentation are top-notch for a Wii game as well. Number 13, 14, and 15 are games that I talked about earlier in this year as well. Downhill Domination, iNinja, and Freedom Fighters. They were some of the most fun games that I played back in the days of Friday night blockbuster trips and pizza and soda fueled sleepovers. Downhill Domination is my personal favorite of these three, but they all have something to offer if you're looking to play some PS2 games you may not have tried before. Downhill Domination is one of the most fun and chaotic racing games ever made. iNinja is a really solid platformer with super satisfying combat, and Freedom Fighters is a third-person tactical shooter with really unique and interesting mechanics in how you can recruit and command soldiers on the battlefield. I highly recommend all three of these games. Number 16, Limbo. Limbo is just one of those games, man. It's the perfect little package. It's short, perfectly paced, full of atmosphere, and rocking an absolutely awesome art style. It's scary too, but not too scary, and when you solve some of the puzzles that this game throws at you, it makes you feel like a genius. It's just such a unique game and one that I remember fondly from childhood, while also still going back to occasionally. Number 17, Silent Hill 2. The Silent Hill series is something I'm sort of fascinated with, but more from an outsider's perspective. I haven't played all of them yet, really just the first two, but if you're into Silent Hill and you haven't heard of the YouTuber Max Derat, I highly recommend that you give him a try. He is an encyclopedia for all things Silent Hill and makes fantastic lore videos about the games among many other things. Go give him a follow. Number 18, Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. You know me, I always need my Monster Hunter fix. This year it was mostly Generations Ultimate, as it was the one that I owned that I hadn't really sunk that much time into yet. So I'm about 40 hours in, maybe a little bit more, and I feel like I've barely scratched the surface. But that's just how it is with these games sometimes. There's a level of depth and amount of content that can barely be matched by any other game out there. And the gameplay loop is something that I am fully addicted to, no shame. Generations Ultimate is cool too because as a longtime fan of the series, I get to see some of the monsters from the older games make appearances again, and it's just really cool to see these OGs get some love from a newer release. Plus, all the weapon types being available is just so nice and necessary for me personally. Don't get me wrong, I could rock the Greatsword all day long if I have to, but my main love is the Charge Blade. I will always prefer to play Monster Hunter games that have the Charge Blade in them from now on, so going back to the older ones is a little bit more challenging for me, but still, I love this series, but mostly this year what I played was Generations Ultimate, and I love it. Number 19, Elex 2. What a weird one to end on. I got Elex 2 for Christmas in 2022, and man, I love these games. They definitely have their quirks, But the world design, the setting, the missions, and the RPG elements are so fantastic. You don't really hear a ton of people talk about the Elex games, or really anything from Piranha Bytes, maybe aside from the Gothic series. And I do think that's partially Piranha Bytes' fault. These games honestly need a bit more polish before they get released. A lot of people are getting more and more turned off of these big game studios that are releasing games in less than ideal states, and Piranha Bytes has never really managed to get a game out without a huge helping of bugs and other technical issues. They're just never going to make it in the mainstream unless they really spend the time and go the extra mile to make sure that their next release is perfect on day one. Aside from that rant, I really enjoyed my time with this game. Even though the story is almost a complete rehash of the first game, this one just feels a little bit better to control, and there's more meaningful relationships to develop as well, making this one just a bit better in my opinion, even if it's not quite as memorable as the first game. And there we have it. Mostly everything that I played in 2023. This was a big year for me as a gamer and for me here on YouTube as well. And I'm super excited to talk about some of the games that I received as Christmas gifts as well, so I hope you stick around and wait for those future videos to release. Coming up on my backlog, I've got Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Bloodborne, The Messenger, Dark Messiah, Might and Magic, and so much more. And all that said, I'd love to hear about your year as well. What was 2023 like for you as a gamer? Did you check a lot off your backlog, or did you add more to it? Did you play Baldur's Gate 3, the game of the year? Or did anything happen this year that you just didn't expect? Write to let me know, and thank you so much for watching.